Hello everyone, welcome back. We're still back in this jewel vending company example. In the previous video, I show you this framework where you start off with data and using data to identify the distribution of something that is uncertain. Okay, so we actually constructed the distribution, the probability distribution for the daily demand for this example. And in this video, we're going to construct the simulation for this example. Now let's build the simulation model in Excel. In this worksheet, I divide the worksheet into three parts. The first part is called model parameters. This is simply the input parameters to the model. Second part is called model. This is where we actually build the model. The third part is called replication. This is where we replicate simulation instances. I'll explain this when we get here. In the model parameters, I also give you the context of the problem we're solving right now in case you are not familiar. And this is a figure we showed in the previous video for simulation. And this is the probability and cumulative probability for possible demands that we derive from the data. Now let's get into the simulation. I'm going to simulate a couple of days, and every day I need the simulated demand. So I'm going to create this day here. Let's say I'm going to simulate 3 days, and I will generate the simulated demand for those 3 days. But if you recall from the previous video, in order to generate simulation, I have a magical device that will generate random numbers between 0 and 1. So I'm going to record the random number over here. Okay, remember that magical device will give me a number between 0 and 1 with equal likelihood for every number that shows up. And let's say that number is 0.5. The magical number I get is 0.5. Well, then I can look up here to know that, well, 0.5 falls in this range, so the simulated demand should be 3. So now the question is, how can we ask Excel to perform this operation? Okay, so to do that, we need to introduce two functions. Starting from here, once we know the random number, how do we ask Excel to look up this and getting this simulated demand? Well, we need to use the function called VLOOKUP. And the VLOOKUP function needs to look up a table because we need to convey this idea to Excel, and we cannot ask Excel to read this graph. So we can instead, we're going to ask Excel to look up a table. So this is a table, a so-called VLOOKUP table. And you see this table has two columns. First is simply, I call it mean of bin. So here, every simulated demand is represented by a bucket. Mean of the bin is simply the smallest number in the bucket. And then here is the simulated demand. So I'm going to copy the simulated demand over here as an easy start. And then for this simulated demand, what is the minimum number in the bucket? For 0, it's 0. For simulated demand of 1, the mean is 0.1. You probably get the idea. For next one, demand of 2, it's 0.25. Okay, you can manually type in, but that's not the most efficient way to do this. So you'll notice that those numbers are simply cumulative probabilities over here. So instead of typing in, we can just copy them. So I can do this equal to this number, and then I'm going to drag down this cell to copy it. Okay. So the first number is always 0, and then you can use this formula to copy all the cumulative probabilities. Now we are ready to use the function. Okay, coming back here, I'm going to type in the function VLOOKUP. Okay, the first input is lookup value. This is the value you wanted to look up for. So that's our random number. So here, second, table array. That's the table we just created. So instead of looking up here, Excel will look up this table. So this table basically captures the idea of this figure. So select the whole table. Remember, there's one rule when you create this VLOOKUP table. You need to make sure that this mean of bin is in the first column of this table. Okay, that's the only requirement. And when you select it, make sure it's in the first column in the table you select. I'm going to put the $sign just to fix a reference. Column index number, it's 2. So what does that mean? That means when Excel look up the table, which column in this table you want Excel to return back. So here we want Excel to look up 0.5 from this table. What you will do is looking at the first column here and see where is 0.5. You will find that 0.5 is in between these two numbers. And when I say 2 here, it will return the value in the second column in this row. So it will return 3. Next input, okay, it's true or false. True is something called approximate match. That's what we need. So I'll just type true. So what does that mean? If you actually select false, that means exact match. In that case, Excel will try to look for this number, 0.5, from the first column here. Okay, and apparently there's no 0.5 here. So if you choose exact match, you will return an error. And that's not what we want Excel to do. We want Excel to find out in which range this 0.5 falls into. Okay, in that case, we use approximate match. Okay, so you see it's 3, so it works. Now let's come back to random number. How do we generate a random number? It's quite easy. You need the function called rand, R-A-N-D. So this function is that magical device I mentioned. This function will give you a number between 0 and 1, and every number in this range will appear with equal probability. Okay, so once you enter rand, you see a random number, and your random number is going to be different from mine. That's normal. When you press F9, if you're using PC and you press F9, Excel will refresh and draw a new random number. Okay, so this is what happens when I press F9. So basically at this point, I already generate simulated demand. Okay, so just to remind again, so in order to simulate an uncertainty, you need 2 functions. One is rand to generate random number. The other is VLOOKUP to perform the simulation.